you there. Jack, please. Hello, everyone. So we're going to continue with hopefully a very interesting panel. But before doing that, I want to do some intros. For you, Sebastian, there was an intro, but I want to mention a few things that were not there. For example, I read that you wrote a book, right? Was a plan for Romania, 7 intellectual revolutions for a country we want to stay in. This was in 2020. Okay.
I'm working on a new one, though, so stay tuned.
That's great. And since you mentioned your story with your grandparent and coming back to Romania, funny, let's say interesting fact I found on Wikipedia, so if Wikipedia is lying, I'm lying, but you can confirm because you are here, that you made a video at some point when you arrived in the airport, and it went really viral with 1.5 million Romanians watching that. And it started a so-called movement, Diaspora Acasă. It's still something going?
Right. To some extent, I think that was an interesting time. If you go back, and Romanians will know what I'm talking about, August 10th, 2018, there was a large protest of the diaspora, and Romanians from around the world came to Bucharest, not just to ask for anything special, but truly to say we care about freedom, we care about democracy, we care about the rule of law, and we don't want politicians to save their butts from jail just because of what they do. But thankfully, that's all behind us, but it was a key juncture in recent history.
That's great. Then I'm gonna say a few words about Jack. Jack McConnell was the first minister of Scotland between 2001 2007, right? UK Special Representative for Peacebuilding, 2008-2010. And he has been a member of the UK House of Lords since 2010. Also, from 1999 to 2011, he was an elected member of the Scottish Parliament. And he was also the Minister of Finance, that's interesting, 1999 to 2000. And also, and this will bring us to our topic for today, he was Minister of Education, Europe, and External Affairs. So let's move forward. The main topic of today's panel is about how emerging technologies can influence and hopefully help education. So the concept of emerging technologies is quite complex. Let's say it used to be in the past about PCs, smartphones, internet, online payments. Now we are talking about blockchain, metaverse, AI, gene editing, electric cars, and others. So the question is for both of you, what is your view on this, and where can all these technologies can lead? Also, maybe you have like a certain angle or an example of how these technologies can help. So let's start with Sebastian, if you want.
Sure. Up until 4 months ago, I was Minister of Innovation and Research and IT. And every single day, I would meet people like you who are really building the future. But I found out that even as Minister of Energy, there's a lot of innovation that has to happen to transform the way our society functions. The thing about energy, nothing works without it. If you imagine a world where there was no energy, well, there would be not much fun. So essentially, in a country like Romania, but it's true, I think, of Scotland and many other places, we are now running on an energy system that dates back 30, 40, 60 years ago. And just last week, I visited a coal mine in Valea Jiului. Those of you who are from Romania will know what I'm saying. You go down in a cage, 300 meters underground, and essentially you see people digging coal just like they did 50, 60, maybe 100 years ago. And that coal is then burnt in a power plant, and that produces energy. So some of our system is still like it was back then, but there's more and more innovation. And so, when it comes to AI and electric cars and smart grids and digitalization of our energy system, ultimately it's about freedom. It's about your freedom as a consumer to have control over your life, essentially. To decide in advanced systems, not in Romania yet, but we're working to get there, to essentially charge your car at certain times of day because electricity is cheaper when you do that. And so there's a way for power companies to communicate to customers when to use electricity at home more because it's cheaper, and then for customers to react accordingly. What we need to do, and I'll conclude with this, is essentially very quickly transform an energy system that has been built decades ago when we had no AI and very little digitalization and so on, to a system that's very decentralized, decarbonized, and green, and resilient. The good news is it can be done, and I will end with an example from Ukraine. I don't know if there's any electrical engineers in the room, but they can confirm what I'm saying. Ukraine, right before the start of the war, essentially the day before the invasion started, did one thing that was vital. It synchronized its grid to the European grid. Before that, it was synchronized to the Russian grid.
Yep.
Normally, this synchronization takes 2 years to accomplish. At its best, it took Romania's grid to synchronize 8 to 10 years. The Ukrainians did it, not by themselves, but with everybody helping, including Romanians, 2 weeks.
Yep.
Jack, you mentioned before that you are also working with in Ukraine with can you tell us a little bit about that, and maybe then we jump to the first question?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I've only been here 1 hour, and I can feel the energy in this amazing building already. But I have to say I agree with Sebastian very much about the Ukrainian example.
Yeah.
What they have done with the Todea app
Right.
for their public services and government services and digitizing those services has been remarkable over the past 2 years. And I know from my own work with the ministers there at the moment that they are planning even more of a revolution in the way they deliver government and education, in the hope that they will be free again soon and that they will be able to move on. But what they did with the grid was very, very clever, and it's made a huge difference to them over the last 18 months. My transformational moment was probably this time last year. Like most politicians, I think I had been making speeches or at least asking questions that were based on the premise that we should all be very scared of this revolution that was coming down the road, that was going to threaten jobs and maybe threaten personal privacy and security. And so on, the tech revolution was going to get out of control. And I was visiting Malawi in southern Africa last autumn. And my foundation has some scholarships there. And we were looking at options for where the girls on the scholarships could maybe get job opportunities after they leave school. And I went to visit a Canadian firm who have set up a tech office in Lilongwe, the capital city of Malawi. Initially with 8 employees, they now have over 100, just 18 months on. And the young Malawians in that office are managing the supermarket purchases of customers in San Francisco and down the east coast of America and Canada in the supermarket chain that is competing with Amazon for those new modern supermarkets where you just go in and everything records on your phone. And they're doing it in Malawi. Never seen jobs like that in one of the 10 poorest countries in the world before. And it suddenly exposed me to the potential here. And I think we all of us who have got any influence over politics and government need to change the mindset. This is not a revolution that's coming.
Okay.
It's a revolution that's happening. It's very different from the social media age, if I can call the last 15 years or so the social media age. This is very, very different. And you mentioned I was Minister for Finance in 1999. We were very excited in 1999 that we could use technology to create one portal for people to find out about government services. That seems like 100 years ago. But I think the potential is massive, and I think if we can think out of the box, if we can imagine the future, if we can regulate properly but moderately, and we can lead, then I think we could transform citizens' lives all over the world.
Great, thanks. Jack, I have a question for you.
Yep.
And it's a little bit related with crypto and blockchain. We saw recently some amendments enforcing in UK in regards with the concept of financial promotions, of course for ensuring better environment and protecting the consumers. The question is UK supportive when it comes to innovative, emerging technologies, or is rather more conservative? What is the feeling of towards these issues in UK?
I think I have many differences with our government in the UK, and life in the UK has been a bit chaotic over the last 6 or 7 years in terms of government and legislation. But I think the current government is giving the right level of priority to this area and setting a bit of a standard. And if the government in the UK changes next year, the current opposition is going to have to step up to that. I think on regulation and legislation, everybody is grappling with this challenge of protecting people's privacy, ensuring there is some protection for equity in the opportunities that are available, but at the same time not stifling innovation and not stifling the freedom to innovate and think big. So in the recent debates on the legislation in the UK, that was very much the challenge, to get the balance right. Some people think we should legislate a bit more. The government chose, I think, a more balanced approach, which is probably worth testing out. But I think they have also, they've combined that with serious investment and strategy in investment, attraction of investment, in the promotion of exports and investment out of the UK, and critically, I think, in higher education and research.
Great. Yeah, usually, you know, technology is moving so fast that regulations cannot keep up. And there's also all the time when you try to put some regulations in place, as we've seen in US, and not only in US, is how you don't, you let innovation to still happen. So yeah, it's not an easy job, but yeah. Sebastian, this one is for you. How about Romania? There were constant discussions to have regulation, especially in the crypto or blockchain space. There were some initiatives in this regard, but let's say until now, I don't think we have something very conclusive or clear. Do you think Romania is a good space for fostering innovation?
Yeah, I do. But that's not because of government, it's because you guys. And yeah, I mean, oftentimes, that's true. Oftentimes, the best thing that government can do is to just step aside and let the free initiative of you all materialize into new projects. I think there's always a danger in stifling innovation because you intervene. and you intervene because you don't know, you just don't understand, or you fear change, and then that creates a prejudice for the entire nation. Because guess what? We are in a race. We are in a global race for talent, for new products, new services, and there will always be countries that will be braver than you, that will push harder against the limits. And so I was very proud of ourselves when last year we launched the first government AI-based advisor called Ion, and he became the Prime Minister's advisor at the time. And Romania was indeed the first country in the world to use AI to inform policymaking and essentially strengthen democracy. I think that was a very good example, and guess what? Other countries around the world, like India, came to the developers of Ion and said, come on over, we'd love to work with you. And it's just an example to say, you know, we don't know what will eventually work. I can't say Ion or a similar product will work, but you have to give it a shot. But to do that, again, I think we need to educate decision makers. They need to understand what the hell is going on in the world, and they don't. As a matter of fact, many of them don't even know how to use a computer.
You mentioned last year in Paris to educate you.
Yeah.
You as politicians or decision makers.
I can't say that enough, because if decision makers don't understand the new technologies, there's no way they can support them. The natural reaction is to shy away and say, let's wait. And so right now, I think Romania's position, and not just on this, on many issues, is to wait and see what the EU does, such as the MiCA regulation on blockchain. And that's, you know, coming, but my own view has been, and I'm still pushing for it, that we should not wait. We should act and let others follow us. Let others learn from us. We're going to make mistakes along the way. That's fine.
Can I?
Please, yeah.
Can I just add to that? You know, as somebody who gets representations, as you do, in Parliament from those who have interests. You know, I think it's absolutely critical that we get decision makers to understand what's going on. But I also think it's really important that we have decision makers who can imagine the future. And I think perhaps the kind of buzz and energy in this room and the ideas that I'm sure will be obvious over the next few days, finding a way of communicating that to decision makers, the potential here, you know, not the potential to be Facebook or the potential to be, you know, bots that are challenging people's privacy or whatever, but actually the potential to change people's lives in transport, in clean energy, in housing, in education, in health, which we're already seeing if we look at it, but might not be entirely obvious to decision makers unless you paint them pictures of what might be possible.
I see. Yeah. Of course, just adding, if I may, Romania is going to align to some European laws that will come into force 2024, 2020,
right.
I don't know, in a few years. And also one thing to mention, it seems, at least for me, this is a personal view when we are talking about the AI, and probably because of the fear how AI could influence some things, also from an economic point of view, but I don't know, wars and stuff like that. It seems that maybe AI will try to be regulated, let's say, faster, but we'll have to see. Jack, continuing on the Sebastian's question, is UK a good place for emerging technologies, for startups right now?
I think it's certainly a good place for research, a good place for partnerships between educational institutions, universities, and so on, and institutes of learning and startups, but also established companies as well. Whether we are the best place at the moment for startups, I think, is an interesting challenge, because I think the sort of political instability that we've had in the UK does not create, whatever the level of regulation is, instability does not create a good environment for startups, because people need some predictability if they're going to invest their time and their money in their startups. So I'm hoping that we're now in a period in the UK where on all sides, the adults are back in charge of the governments and the opposition, and we will see some stability in key policy areas like this, and that would allow startups to have time to grow and to flourish. But certainly the educational environment and the investment environment is there. There's a lot of money now going into supporting people, and I think this sort of light touch regulation is probably a good environment to take a few risks.
I see. Sebastian, this is for you. What do you think we can do in Romania, maybe from what you've seen when you studied and work in other countries, to catalyze the potential you mentioned in the tech space and the talent that is here? You know, it's all the time this saying, best people are, I don't know, leaving Romania, or we are an outsourcing country, not actually building products for the startup or company that you are working, but for others. What do we think we can do? And maybe there are some lessons learned or things you've seen in other places?
Well, I think that's a complicated question, and there's a lot of things we could do. Again, the first thing is do no harm. I think the principle stands when it comes to innovation in the private sector and how government interacts with the private sector, and there's still a lot of fear in the Romanian government to interact with private companies, because somebody might claim that you have an illegitimate interest in such a partnership. I think second, we need to finance research and development. Romania is still dead last in Europe when it comes to public funding for R&D. And there's a certain spot in the early life of an enterprise where the capital is the riskiest, and you do need that public support. That's how Silicon Valley became Silicon Valley. That's how Israel became tech nation, innovation nation. And that's what I believe that we need to do in Romania. So I'm announcing, I think it's for the first time, that within the Ministry of Energy, we'd like to start an R&D hub with a dedicated line of financing for innovative solutions for the green transition. And the doors are wide open. We have a total of 18 billion euros to invest. They're not all going to be available for R&D, but some of that will. And so I challenge all of you essentially to come to the ministry and just knock on our doors and say, I have an idea. That's essentially what happened with the AI-based advisor, Ion. Somebody had an idea, we said, let's give it a shot. I would love to be able, as a government, to finance some of these bold ideas and have Romania be, indeed, the first country in the world to lead the way.
On the other hand, it's, you know,
And by the way, I was in Lisbon recently with our country's president, and I had been in Lisbon to the Web Summit, and I think many of you have. And I got to see what the Portuguese call the unicorn factory. And I absolutely love the idea. They rehabilitated a former industrial factory and gathered their startups, public agencies, banks, big IT companies. They put them all in one place, and under that roof, they're creating. They're building unicorns. I would love to see that in Bucharest. I think we have many beautiful places that could be given new life, and we're going to start working on that with the Ministry of Energy.
Nice, nice. maybe to add on what you said, also usually, you know, government is not the best investor. Also, is this saying, you know, an idea without execution is hallucination. Of course, you have to start from an idea, but it's not so important how good the idea is. It's all the time about execution and actually getting there. And also, since we are, let's say, we have a startup culture at MultiversX, usually the idea is changing and you need to adapt. And since you mentioned Israel and as a startup nation, one thing I've learned being there a few times, what they told me, especially in the research area, probably you know they are very good in the medical part, in biology, genetics and stuff like that, is the so-called partnership between the private sector and the government. So definitely this can work, but I guess it's not something that you take for granted or it's necessarily easy to implement. Let's approach a little bit the tech education area and the intersection of and the intersection with the emerging tech. Jack, this one is for you. How are UK universities competing to attract students, especially post-Brexit? If you know, of course, or have a thought on that.
Yeah, well, I think in the UK, the universities are competing to attract students on the basis of quality. There's also now some significant funding going into PhD and research fellow posts from the government to try and attract talent from all over the world to come to the UK. We already have some of the best universities in the world in tech, but you have to always keep moving ahead of the game. So I think that national effort is now recognised that we need to attract talent around the world, and that takes money. But it also takes, I think, the potential for commercial partnerships. So I think UK universities are becoming increasingly good at working with other partners. There are some obvious examples of that. The Cambridge partnerships are fantastic. The recent development of a malaria vaccine, is life-changing in countries all over the world. But I know that, for example, in Glasgow, there is an announcement coming of a big new partnership there that I think is going to be very exciting. And it's that there's a creative energy about the leadership of UK universities where, in a way that maybe once they were very precious about their own institutions, they now see themselves as catalysts, working with entrepreneurs and innovators and the private sector to take what they can do in the laboratory or in the research and then explode that through partnerships and commercial activity.
Interesting. Sebastian, you have sure interacted from various angles with education space. I guess in several countries. You mentioned, and I mentioned, you studied abroad at some prestigious universities. Have you seen any interesting mechanism that we could import in order to encourage talent and increase the potential of the education here in Romania?
Let me state it very bluntly and honestly. I don't think you need to go to Harvard or Stanford to build the next unicorn. You can do it right here in Romania. Mark my words. As a matter of fact, the creators of this amazing company are a product of this country. And I think in this day and age, access to knowledge is so easy that if you just, consider the world your oyster and just get out there and learn and interact with potential mentors, I mean, you can probably get to almost anybody. I think you've all heard of Steve Jobs' story when he was starting out and he was looking for an internship. So he called, I think, Packard. He was 12 years old at the time, Steve Jobs, and called the landline, found it in the phone book, made that phone call, got the internship. He was looking for some spare parts. And Packard was so impressed with Jobs that he said, why don't you come work for us? And he did an internship, and maybe that's why he became who he is, or who he was. Still is in many ways. So I think as long as you have initiative and courage and the desire to succeed, you can do it from any country in the world. No country in the world has a monopoly on success today.
Absolutely. That's true. We have just one more question, and this one is for both of you. What do you think is the impact of these technologies, especially emerging ones, on education, on these ones specifically?
Well,
maybe Jack, you want to start?
One of the things that Lucian didn't mention at the beginning is that I was a mathematics teacher before I was a full-time politician. And I remember the days when we first started debating whether or not children could be allowed to use calculators in the classroom, in the mathematics classroom. And I also remember the long discussions about how we could find out, how we could catch them if they had dared to use a calculator at home for their homework. The obsession of the time was to control this new phenomenon where more and more families had a calculator. And of course, everybody was going to have access to a calculator eventually, and certainly in the area where I taught. And I look back on that period and just shake my head because we were so wrong in the approach that we took. We didn't change the curriculum, we didn't change the assessment style, we didn't change the teaching approach, we didn't even particularly teach the teachers how to teach with a calculator, because most of us had been in training before there was calculators easily available. And you know, I think we have to have a completely different mindset for education in the second quarter of the 21st century. We can't make the same mistakes as we made in the last quarter of the last century. We need to change curriculum and assessment, the way that people teach. That means training the staff in a whole new way. I think this could almost be described as an emergency. Be fast, it needs to be comprehensive, it needs to be a complete overhaul of the way that we look at education, because otherwise we'll just either be catching up or trying to control people. And we cannot say that the question in the classroom should be, you know, can somebody use AI to help them develop their knowledge or to produce a piece of work? Surely the questions for the future are, how do you pose the right question? How do you challenge what you get from something that is generated by emerging technology? How do you, as a teacher, guide the student to deepen their knowledge enough to then question what they are doing and analyze that and make good judgments? I think this is a massive challenge for the education systems in developed countries. But if we imagine the future, then I think we could see how this could transform education, transform skills, and create the kind of imaginative, challenging, democratic people, citizens of the future, who would not only be successful commercially, but would be much better citizens in their judgments as well.
Yep. I just remember, I think Yuval Harari, in one of his books, said that we should not, it's just an example, so it's not the exact thing he said, but what I remember is maybe we should not teach geography, we should teach how to use, I don't know, Google Earth, Google Maps. Maybe we should add, I don't know in what grade exactly, so-called how to search on Google, because asking the right question sometimes is
and challenging the answer.
It's challenging,
Thinking
and
about
if you
it.
know you have the
Yep.
skills to search, sometimes it helps you a lot. Sebastian, if you can answer the last question.
Yeah, I'll give you one example and a quick story. So I was Minister of Research, Innovation and Digitalization about a year ago, and this team of high schoolers came from Brasov, and they brought these VR glasses to my office, and they said, try it on. And I said, why? And they said, you'll see. And I did, and it put me in a virtual lab where I literally assembled an engine. I took my little virtual hands with each part and I screwed the screws and all that stuff. And to me, I'll never forget it because I thought back of my school days when we would perhaps read about how to assemble an engine in a book. And the test was, can you memorize it? You know, can you name all the spare parts? That's stupid today. It's stupid. You can just Google it. So I think it's a widely different paradigm. But I do think also that all this new technology instills a sense of humility in all of us. They say that the first step to stop being an idiot is to realize that you're an idiot and you don't know everything under the sun. I have that realization every day. And I remember this great story of a former Secretary of Defense that was supposed to give a speech on a stage like this, and he had a paper cup in his hand. And he said, and he tossed his speech, and he said, I'm going to give you a speech about this paper cup. And he said, 1 year ago, I was Secretary of Defense. I'm not Secretary of Defense anymore, but 1 year ago, I arrived at this conference on a plane with a business class ticket. The organizers paid for it. I got off the plane, and the driver was right there. He took me to the hotel. I had already been checked in, walked up to my room, had a nice box of chocolates sitting on the table. And then they brought me down, and they took me to the backstage, and I asked for coffee, and they said, of course. And here's a ceramic cup, this beautiful ceramic cup for him. And he said, well, this year I traveled on economy class. I paid for my own ticket to be here. There was no driver at the airport. I had to call a cab. At the hotel, they almost had no room for me, and I paid for my own room, and I called a cab again to get here to the conference, and they didn't take me to the backstage. I walked through all the rows, and here I asked for some coffee, and they said, you want some coffee? Just go get it over there. Some paper cups. And the lesson is, don't ever forget that ceramic cup is not for you, it's for the position you hold. And that's very, very temporary. In your endeavors, all of you, or most of you anyway, will get very high up. I think it's important to remember when you do that, that ultimately we're all the same, and the coffee tastes just the same in a paper cup.
That's good. Please.
One of the best examples I ever heard of that phenomenon of changing from being looked after by everybody to doing your own thing. A former foreign secretary in the UK was asked what had changed most in his life when he stopped being a minister and became an opposition member of parliament again after losing an election. And he said the strangest thing was getting in the back seat of the car and the car doesn't move.
Good. So, thank you very much, gentlemen, for a great talk.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you, Lucian.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. What a pleasure.
Cheers.